Starting at page 150 of Dean Koontz, Dark Rose of the Heart. When Roy Moreau woke in his Westwood hotel room, the digital clock on the nightstand read 4:19. He had slept less than 5 hours, but he felt rested. So he switched on the lamp. He threw back the covers, sat on the edge of the bed in his pajamas, squinted as his eyes adjusted to the brightness, then smiled at the Tupperware container that stood beside the clock. The plastic was translucent, so he could see only a vague shape within. He put the container on his lap and removed the lid. Guinevere's hand. He felt blessed to possess an object of such great beauty. How sad, however, that his ravishing splendor wouldn't last much longer. In 24 hours, if not sooner, the hand would have deteriorated visibly. Its comeliness would be but a memory. Already it had undergone a color change. Fortunately, a certain chalkiness only emphasized the exquisite bone structure in the long, elegantly tapered fingers. Reluctantly, Roy replaced the lid, made sure the seal was tight, and put the container aside. He went into the living room of the two-room suite. His attaché case, computer, and cellular phone were already connected, plugged in, and arranged on a luncheon table by a large window. Soon he was in touch with Mama. He requested the results of the investigation that he'd asked her to undertake the previous evening. When he and his men had discovered that the DMV address for Spencer Grant was an uninhabited oil field, he had been so furious then. He was calm now, cool, in control. Reading Mama's report from the screen, tapping the page down key each time he wanted to continue, Roy quickly saw that the search for Spencer Grant's true address hadn't been easy. During Grant's months with the California Multi-Agency Task Force on Computer Crime, he'd learned a lot about the nationwide infonet and the vulnerabilities of the thousands of computer systems it comprised. Evidently, he had acquired codes and procedures, books and master programming, atlases for the computer systems of various telephone companies, credit agencies, and government offices. Then he must have managed to carry or electronically transmit them from the task force offices to his own computer. After quitting his job, he had erased every reference to his whereabouts from public and private records. His name appeared only in his military, DMV, Social Security, and police department files, and in every case, the given address was one of the two that had already proved to be false. The national file of the Internal Revenue Service contained other men with his name. However, none was his age, had his social security number, lived in California, or had paid withholding taxes as an employee of the LAPD. Grant was missing, as well from the records of the state of California tax authorities. If nothing else, he was apparently a tax evader. Roy hated tax evaders. They were the epitome of social irresponsibility. According to Mama, no utility company currently builds Spencer Grant. Yet, no matter where he lived, he needed electricity, water, telephone, garbage pickup, and probably natural gas. Even if he had erased his name from billing lists to avoid paying for utilities, he couldn't exit their service records without triggering disconnection of essential services. Yet he could not be found. Mama assumed two possibilities. First, Grant was honest enough to pay for utilities. However, he altered the company's billing and service records to transfer his accounts to a false name that he had created for himself. The sole purpose of those actions would be to further his apparent goal of disappearing from public record, making himself hard to find if any police agency or governmental body wanted to talk to him. Like now. Or second, he was dishonest, eliminating himself from billing records, paying for nothing, while maintaining service under a false name. In either case, he and his address were somewhere in those company files under the name that was his secret identity. He could be located if his alias could be uncovered. Roy froze Mama's report and returned to the bedroom to get the envelope that contained the computer-projected portrait of Spencer Grant. This man was an unusually crafty adversary. Roy wanted to have the clever bastard's face for reference while reading about him. At the computer again, he paged forward in the report. Mama had been unable to find an account for Spencer Grant at any bank or savings and loan association. Either he paid for everything with cash or he maintained accounts under an alias. Probably the former. There was unmistakably paranoia in this man's actions, so he wouldn't trust his funds in a bank under any circumstances. Roy glanced at the portrait beside the computer. Grant's eyes did look strange, feverish, no doubt about it, a trace of madness in his eyes, maybe even more than a trace. Because Grant might have formed an S-chapter corporation through which he did his banking and bill paying, Mama had searched the files of the California Secretary of Treasury and various regulatory bodies seeking his name as a registered corporate officer. Nothing. Every bank account had to be tied to a social security number, so Mama looked for a savings or checking account with Grant's number, regardless of the name under which the money was deposited. Nothing. He might own the home in which he lived, so Mama had checked property tax records in the counties that Roy targeted. Nothing. If he did own a home, he held title under a false name. Another hope. If Grant had ever taken a university class or been a hospital patient, he might not have remembered that he'd supplied his home address on applications and admission forms, and he might not have deleted them. Most educational and medical institutions were regulated by federal laws, therefore, their records were accessible to numerous government agencies. Considering the number of such institutions, even in a limited geographical area, Mama needed the patience of a saint or a machine, the latter of which she possessed, and for all her efforts, she found nothing. Roy glanced at the portrait of Spencer Grant. He was beginning to think that this man was merely mentally disturbed, but something far darker than that. An actively evil person. Anyone this obsessed with his privacy was surely an enemy of the people. Chilled, Roy returned his attention to the computer. When Mama undertook a search as extensive as the one that Roy had requested of her, and when the search was fruitless, she didn't give up. She was programmed to apply her spare logic circuits during periods of lighter work and between assignments to rifle through a large store of mailing lists that the agency had accumulated, looking for the name that couldn't be found elsewhere. Name soup. That was what the lists were called. They were lifted from the book and record clubs, national magazines, Publishers Clearinghouse, major political parties, Catalog sales, companies peddling everything from sexy lingerie to electronic gadgetry to meat by mail. Interest groups like antique car enthusiasts and stamp collectors, as well as from numerous other sources. In the name Soup, Mama had found a Spencer Grant different from the others in the Internal Revenue Service records. Intrigued, Roy sat up straighter in his chair. Almost 2 years ago, this Spencer Grant had ordered a dog toy from a mail order catalog aimed at pet owners, a hard rubber musical bone. The address on that list was in California, Malibu. Mama had returned to the utility company's files to see whether services were maintained at that address. They were. The electrical connection was in the name of Stuart Peck. The water service and trash collection account was in the name of Mr. Henry Holden. Natural gas was billed to James Gable. The telephone company provided service to one John Humphrey. They also billed a cellular phone to William Clark at that address. AT&T provided long-distance service for Wayne Gregory. Property tax records listed the owner as Robert Tracy. Mama had found the scared man. In spite of his efforts to vanish behind the elaborate screen of multifarious identities, though he had diligently attempted to erase his past and to make his current existence as difficult to prove as that of the Loch Ness Monster, and though he had nearly succeeded in being as elusive as a ghost, he had been tripped up by a musical rubber bone, a dog toy. Grant had seemed inhumanely clever, but the simple human desire to please a beloved pet had brought him down. That's pages 150 through 154. That's all for this video. Thank you.